Even before the intervention research, which is what this recommendation focuses on because it's about instruction. But even before that, it is really strong in the sense of it started with just noticing that phonological awareness was a large difference, a key difference between good and poor readers. So if you tested second graders, for example, on phonological awareness, the readers who were successful and on grade level tended to have good phonological awareness, and the readers who were less successful or not on grade level tended to have poor phonological awareness. So it became an area that we were interested in, of course. And then the second sort of body of research around phonological awareness looked at, well, what if you see that, because we can test phonological awareness quite early, preschool or kindergarten. So what if you notice that a student in preschool or kindergarten has poor phonological awareness? What does that mean later for them in their reading career? And overall, with a few exceptions, it was highly correlated if you had poor phonological awareness as a preschooler or a kindergartner, as a young child, you tended to struggle with reading later in third, fourth, et cetera grades. So then the third body of research, which is what this recommendation relates to, was, well, is there anything we can do about that? So if we can notice early on that a student has difficulty with phonological awareness, what happens if we teach them phonological awareness? Do their outcomes later in the grade levels change? And successfully, the answer was yes. They can become better readers by us helping them improve their phonological awareness early on. So most of this research that was in the studies related to this recommendation was done at kindergarten and first grade, because that is typically in our curriculum where we would see phonological awareness being taught as we move into then the phonics and the word recognition. But of course, there are students who may need some intervention in phonological awareness, even if they are at the end of first grade or second grade and moving up. This recommendation is based on 17 studies, so that's quite a few, and every single study had positive effects for students. That's why you see the strong evidence marked for this one. They had positive effects on all of their measures too. So some of them measured letter names, some measured letter sounds, and some measured different aspects of phonological awareness. And some measured more than one of those. And in every case, we'd see positive effects for the students who received explicit systematic instruction in phonological awareness. So that gives us a pretty, and those cross diverse samples as well. So that's part of the strong evidence aspect. So that gives us pretty, not only strong, consistent, but generalizable across our different students, that this is an area that we want to pay a lot of attention to. The studies implemented these action steps, or these were turned into action steps from what was implemented in the studies. First, that we're teaching students to recognize and manipulate sounds in words. So that gets towards our different phonological awareness skills, that they're hearing those different sounds. And what we really focus on in the research is the extent to which that helps them, and you'll see in the other action steps, connect to then letter sounds and integrate that. So if I know that at makes cat, that's going to help me when I'm sounding out with letters later that word and those sounds. It's also going to help me with spelling. If I know that cat is made of k-at, I can then separate those sounds and then match the letters to those sounds with the spelling. Just being able to hear and manipulate those sounds also helps students with distinguishing between words, which is connected to the vocabulary that we already talked about. So for example, I saw a really clear example of this just a few weeks ago when I was in a classroom and the teacher was reading a book, it was about birds, and it had the word squawk in it because the bird squawked. And so the teacher was talking about what that word means. And one of the students said, I know what squawk means. My mom squawks down to pick up the broom. And so just that difference, so obviously that student was talking about squat, but being able to hear those phonemes can actually relate to other aspects of our reading, including vocabulary. You have to be able to distinguish the word before you can learn the meaning of the word, right? So the second action step is related to teaching those letter sounds then, which starts to get us into the print and the phonics part. And really importantly, connecting those. So if we know that cat has those sounds, what letters map onto those sounds, and we use that together to help our reading and our spelling, okay? And so Carol is now going to talk about how to implement those action steps.
All right, we'll try and do some practice things on this one too so that you guys don't fall asleep after lunch. All right, so let's go and look at the first action. So our first action that we have is teaching students to recognize and manipulate the segments of sounds into speech. So we're going to practice two different ways that you can do that. And again, going back to what we talked about at the beginning of having those instructional elements present so that all students are getting practice opportunities. So the one, and there's an example then on the presentation that you have, but you can use a concrete object, and you saw this in the video. It was one of the routines that we watched in the videos as well. And so the concrete object is each cube represents a separate phoneme for the students. Students at this point are just doing it auditorily where they don't see the print. We haven't attached it back to the print yet, so they're just manipulating auditorily. So each time I tap a cube, I'll say a sound. When I slide my finger over the top of the cube, you'll say the word. So you guys will be my students. Let me show you the first one. It, hit. Now you guys, it's your turn. S, w, a, m. J, a, k. F, o, at. B, r, n. So you get the idea that for every phoneme, you can tap a cube. When you slide over the top, students are going to blend those sounds together. Obviously, do I have kindergarten teachers in here? Any kindergarten? No? No kindergarten teachers? If you're working with kindergarten students, so I know that there's special ed or students that are just developing, what's going to happen when you say it and you slide your finger? What kind of response are you going to get back? Yeah, or crickets or whatever, right? You may not get anything. So you're going to have to do some scaffolds. So one of the things that you can think about is only doing words with all continuous sounds and holding those sounds. So for those students that are struggling and we want to intensify it with those scaffolds, we can phonologically have them hold all of the sounds, and they're more likely to remember the beginning part of it. So for instance, I'll show you a scaffolded for students that are just starting or students that might be struggling. So you're my students. When I slide my finger, you'll say the word. Mom. So that would be a scaffold, right? Where you hold each of the sounds and they're not the discrete units in between. One of the things I'll have a lot of teachers do is they want to immediately start with the scaffolds, and they immediately want to start that way. We don't have to do that. We find that about 90% of the students can be really successful at the least amount of scaffolding, and then they're going to progress a lot quicker in their blending skills. So you can do some voiceover scaffolding as well. Soon as students don't need the scaffold, we need to take those scaffolds away and go back to how it is with the least amount of scaffolding. So everybody, you don't have the cubes in front of you, but everybody just hold up your finger as if you're holding cubes. You're going to be doing it as the teacher from right to left, because when you're facing the students, it's going to be in print directionality, right? So let's do the word hit as the teacher, where we're going to face the student, my finger's facing you. We're just going to tap and say the sounds, and we're not going to say anything because they have that in their head, and so we don't want to say anything in between. We're just going to do an immediate slide to signal them to respond. So everybody, let's do the word hit as students. Ready? Begin. It. And then we would slide and the students would say, do the word fame. F-A-M. All right, so you get the idea. We'll practice that in a minute. Now, let's look at the reverse of that, which is phoneme segmentation. And that's where, make sure I have it up there, that's where we're going to give students the word first, and we're going to have them break it apart into individual phonemes. So if I said the word hit, each time I hold up a finger, you would tell me another sound in the word hit. For instance, hit, it, and then I would immediately say the next word. All right, so now you're my students. Jack, more. My turn, more. Or. Your turn, more. Fame. Though. More. So you saw the error correction, right? Neutral tone, my turn, your turn. We did a couple more, came back to it. So they got a chance to practice. Remember, my turn, your turn, take it out of short-term memory, bring it back. So that idea, they get a lot of practice with this. If you do it on a daily basis as you're developing this phonemic awareness, they can get, we can do about 8 to 10 practices in 30 seconds. You know, once the students have learned the routine, it takes them about 2 days to learn the routine and what it is that they're doing, okay? At your table, and again, like I said, we're going to do some practice so you guys don't fall asleep today. So phoneme manipulation practice, here is what the teacher would see. So I had them written down on a piece of paper. You guys couldn't see them, right, as we were doing it. So this is what the teacher would see. Each of you just turn to a partner, practice a couple of them using the phoneme blending, practice a couple of them using the phoneme segmentation. For instance, it would be it, b, r, n. So practice a couple that way, then practice a couple where they're going to segment. Give them the word. Each time you hold up a finger, they're going to tell you the next sound. All right, so that's that phoneme, that action that we want students manipulating those sounds. Incredibly powerful, and like Jeanne said, all the research is really strong behind the evidence of providing that practice in your classroom. So action step number 2, teach students the letter-sound relations. So one of the things that we know as an activity is using sound spelling cards as that cueing system as you're teaching students that letter-sound relation. So it's not just a one-time thing that we show you that the apple starts with the A sound spelled by the A, or on the seal. These are some old Houghton Mifflin cards, if anybody's curious. They're an older series. Huh? Yeah, Journeys still has them very similar, but this is actually from the old version. A lot of people will ask me. But Journeys, the new one, they're still very similar in what they have. So the seal card, and the old version is beautiful. In fact, I actually like the old version better than some of the newer versions, to be honest, and we could talk about why later. But S, C, E, C, I, consonant are the sound spellings that make this sound. These should be posted in every classroom as students are learning to read. And they're using it as a cueing. The way that I talk to teachers about it, there's only so many practice opportunities that I can direct you as a teacher. But if every time you look up at the wall as that cueing system, that's another practice opportunity that you're getting as a student. So just by pure act of posting them, teaching students to refer to them, you're almost doubling the amount of practice that they're getting and that that they'll learn. And then you also get, if we look at our long vowel cards, if we look at the ice cream card, these are complex spellings, that we're asking students to recognize in their decoding and in their encoding, in their writing. So by posting them up there, we're giving them many more practice opportunities to use. When I work with district people and principals, and I go into classrooms, I tell them, you can tell what teachers are referring to these all the time with the students, because when they're looking for something, the kids' heads will turn and look at the sound spelling cards and get those practice opportunities. If they're not up, they don't have the opportunity to do that. And if they're not being referred to, kids don't know they're supposed to be looking for those as a different practice opportunity. So those sound spelling cards are an extremely powerful tool as we're looking at students understanding to make that connection to those sound spellings. Action step number 3, use word building and other activities to link students' knowledge of letter-sound relationships with that phonemic awareness. So we're going to do that warm-up with that phonemic awareness, and then we want to move to print. You know, right off in kindergarten, we should be moving to print and linking it directly with those phonemic awareness activities. So one of the ways that we can do that is word building. This is in the IAS practice guide, this activity. I don't think word building is probably a new skill idea, you know, to any of us, but just remembering the importance of that. So using the letter cards, you know, that students are. So they start with the word fat and then change a letter to make the word fan. And they have to be able to process those sounds to know what letter they're going to be changing. And then you can keep asking them to change and make the new letter, change and make the new letter, okay? So I don't think that's probably a new activity, but the importance of, if you're not seeing activities like this in the instruction, the evidence is very strong that we should be. The other one, and is this, oh, here, let me put the last one on here. Let me go all the way down, get these up here. When we're doing encoding, where we're spelling or having students write the word, so they have to be able to process those sounds, manipulate those sounds in their head, and then we want them connecting those sounds to the correct spelling or the correct letters. So in order for students to be able to do that, they need to hear the word, segment the phonemes in the word, write the word using the correct spelling patterns, and then receive immediate error correction from the teacher. So let me show you what a really quick one would look like. And it's different than a spelling test because we're not asking students to memorize how to write the word. We're asking them to use their encoding strategies to be able to correctly apply those sound spellings into the word. All right, so you guys are my students. The word is path. What's the word? Say this, the students walked on the path around the lake. And again, this goes back to Jeanne talking about the importance of kids understanding what the word is. It's not squat, but squawk. You know, it's not pat, but it's path. The students walked on the path around the lake. What's the word? Path. Say the sounds in path. Pick up your pen, write the word path. So then the students would write the word path while the teacher is going around providing feedback. An extremely important component because it's not a spelling test. It's teaching students in instruction how to use those strategies. So I might go around and a student might have PAT, right? And I could say, oh, look up at the thumb card, the 2 letters that make the sound. So what am I teaching them to do? Use the cueing system. After they write TH several times, if we're doing this every day, what happens after a while? They're always going to write TH for the sound. Really exciting in the first grade project that we did. We added this in our Tier 1 and Tier 2 instruction as an enhancement to the core instruction and to the Tier 2 instruction. The teacher, not only were the reading outcomes higher, but the teachers reported how much higher writing outcomes were because students were fluent at using correct spelling and handwriting after practicing every day. How beautiful is that? When you can do, and we'd spent only 5 minutes a day on encoding during Tier 1 instruction. So if we're looking at timing, we did 4 words every single day, and we would spend about 5 minutes. That was our goal. And so using that same strategy that we did. Now, once they write the word path and the teacher's given a little bit of feedback, you're not going to be able to get to all 20 kids. If you've got 20 kids out there, you're going to come back and you're immediately going to show them the correct spelling. And so the teacher comes back up here, path, P-A-A-T-H. Everybody look at what I have. I want everybody to write the word path one more time. Now, if somebody wrote it incorrectly, now they're going to have to write it correctly again. If they wrote it correctly, not going to hurt them to write it a second time again, right? And then we would go on to the next word. So again, not a spelling test, but instruction and practice on how students are attaching those sound spellings into writing and practice. It is definitely what can cement them learning those sound spellings in their decoding. That's really why that evidence is so strong, to have that piece in there, okay? So again, we want to have that phonological awareness processing, that phonemic awareness, phoneme blending, phoneme segmenting. We want to make sure that we are teaching them those sound spellings. We're using a queuing system. We have it posted for them. And then we want to have them attach it to print. So whether it's in word building, whether it's in encoding, whatever that looks like, that's our recommendation too, okay? All right, what I want you guys to do is go back to your action plan that you wrote your notes on for recommendation 1. And there's a spot on there for recommendation 2. And then I did have some guiding kind of questions for your discussion at the table. I'll give you a few minutes. Number 1, how do these actions and activities relate to your previous knowledge and compare to your previous practice? You might be doing these things in your practice or something similar, so have a discussion about that. Select 2 to 3 activities that we talked about in the recommendation and plan how those might be implemented in your district or schools, tier 1, tier 2, whatever that looks like. And then number 3, we talk about selecting a date where we're going to be looking at that. So that's something that you can talk more about tomorrow in our day 2 if you want to. But for sure, I want you to discuss these activities for recommendation 2 and how they relate to what you're doing, and a couple of those actions you can take back. All right, go ahead and share. So before we move on to recommendation 3, I just wanted to check after your discussion, did anybody have questions? One comment that I want to make then is somebody did come up and was saying, so this is your recommendation in kindergarten that you would have students do word building and you would have them do dictation? Yes, absolutely yes. In fact, in my kindergarten classrooms that I work in right now, they are already doing dictation and word building. In fact, a month ago, I was working in a district, and I went in and did model lessons in kindergarten, and they had learned A and M, and this is a district that starts in August, by the way. They had done A and M already, and so I said, the first sound is, what's the sound? Pick up your pen, write the letter that makes the sound, and so then they're just writing individual letters, right? And then they had the map card because they happen to have Wonders, the Macmillan-McGraw-Hill Wonders curriculum. So their M card was the map card. So students that were struggling, you would prompt them, remember, look up at the map card if you forgot how to write that letter. And then they started with A, and then once you have A and M, what can they write? Am. The word is am. What's the word? You know, and you give them a sentence, have them say the sounds in am, pick up your pen, write the word am. So those students are already on a daily basis either writing as letters or writing words. And then in smaller group with a teacher, they can do some word building activities. I wouldn't take a class of 28 kindergartners right now and do word building with the letter cards. You know, it's not an efficient use of your time or your instruction. But in a small group or with students that are really really struggling too, that you're doing some differentiated work, that works well. But yes, 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 from the start of kindergarten, it's powerful.